No one hires a thief with a license, my mother said, and 19 people in the basement fellowship room at Grace River Church turned to look at me. She said it 2 weeks before my first salon chair rental was supposed to begin, after she and my father helped file a false shoplifting report claiming I had stolen $4,260 in beauty inventory from a store where I had never worked. They used that report number to freeze my contract, called my licensing board, and let our whole church believe I was under criminal investigation. Then, one Tuesday morning, a woman in a navy blazer opened a folder and said 7 words that changed everything. This loss was paid before her name. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. My name is Lauren Elise Parker. I'm 24 years old. Now let me take you back to Cedar Rapids, Iowa in March of 2023. I had spent most of my childhood learning how to become less visible. That sounds dramatic, but I do not mean it dramatically. I mean, I learned the practical version of shrinking. I learned how to enter a room without shifting attention, how to answer in a tone that sounded agreeable even when I disagreed, and how to hand over my own version of events whenever my parents had already offered theirs. My mother, Denise Parker, liked to say I had a gift for peacekeeping. What she meant was that I had a talent for swallowing my first reaction and replacing it with one she could live with. My father, Randall Parker, was softer in presentation and harder in effect. My mother handled the words. My father handled the atmosphere around them. If she criticized me, he would lean back, fold his arms, and let the silence tell me she was correct. If she told relatives I was emotional, he would give one of those tired half nods that made it look as though he had carried a burden for years. Between the two of them, I was always being translated into someone smaller than I really was. I was the younger of 2 daughters. My sister, Brittany Parker Henson, was 28 then, married, pregnant with her first baby, and very good at understanding where power sat in a room. She was not cruel in the wild, obvious way. She was careful. She could pass a knife under the table while smiling above it. If my mother was weather, Brittany was architecture. She built her advantage slowly, and once it was standing, everyone acted as though it had always been there. That is how long it took them to erase me. The only place I felt fully legible was at school and later in beauty school. Hair made sense to me in a way people often did not. Texture, tone, weight, pattern, timing. If someone sat in my chair and told me they wanted to feel less tired or more expensive or simply like themselves again, I knew how to listen. I loved the smell of clean sectioning clips and product on a quiet morning. I loved the bright practical light over the mirrors. I loved that when you did the work properly, the result was visible. There was no debate afterward. Either the line was clean or it was not. By February of 2023, I had passed my state boards, received my cosmetology license, and signed a provisional chair rental agreement with a salon called Maple and Ash Studio on First Avenue Northeast. The owner, Tessa Moreno, was 37, exacting and kind in a way that did not require sweetness. She liked organized people and clean stations. I could work with that. My first 6 weeks were going to be a reduced rate while I built clientele. Then I would move to full rental. I had saved $3,810 for my start, every bill folded into a cream envelope in my dresser, and then later deposited into my checking account because I was trying very deliberately to live like an adult whose life belonged to her. My quiet, steady person in all of this was Nina Flores, one of the estheticians at Maple and Ash. Nina was 32, the kind of woman who did not make speeches and did not fill silence just because it existed. On my trial day, she noticed my hands shaking while I set up my station and slid a peppermint tea beside me without comment. Later, when I thanked her, she said, "You don't have to talk before you're ready here." That sentence stayed with me for months. There are people who make room without looking like they are doing anything at all. Nina was one of them. I still lived at home then, which now sounds impossible even to me. But housing was expensive. I had just finished school, and my parents had spent years describing independence as something fragile girls attempted before coming home wiser. My room was upstairs, painted a pale blue I had chosen at 16 because it looked like a place where breath could settle. I paid my own car insurance, my phone bill, my testing fees, my tools, and a monthly amount toward groceries that my mother insisted on calling contributing to the family in front of other people. It kept me feeling beholden in all the ways she liked. The trouble started with a supply store called Sheer Essence Beauty Supply on Wiley Boulevard. It was not a place I shopped often because Maple and Ash had preferred vendors, but my mother's longtime friend, Colleen Mercer, managed the retail side there. Colleen was 51, always overbright, always touching your forearm during conversation, always acting 1 degree more familiar than the relationship justified. She and my mother had sung together in church for years. Their friendship was the kind built on mutual usefulness, not affection, which can be even more durable. On Saturday, March 11th, my mother asked if I could stop by Sheer Essence with her after lunch because she wanted help choosing a flat iron for Brittany's baby shower gift bags. I remember the exact day because there was still dirty snow pressed into the edges of the parking lot, and the sky had that bright metallic color Iowa gets in late winter when spring is trying to negotiate. Inside the store, it smelled like synthetic coconut, bleach powder, and cardboard. Colleen hugged my mother, kissed the air near my cheek, and said, "So this is our little professional now." I hated the word little in her mouth. We were there maybe 20 minutes. I picked up 2 combs, a pack of sectioning clips, and a small bottle of heat protectant spray. My mother wandered. Colleen kept disappearing into the stockroom and returning with things she wanted my mother to admire. Near the register, I noticed a teenage boy with freckles and a maroon hoodie counting foil boxes behind the counter. Colleen introduced him as Travis, her nephew there to help with inventory on weekends. He gave me one quick, embarrassed smile and went back to his boxes. It would matter later that I remembered his face. At the register, my mother realized she had left her wallet in the car and laughed as though wallets were a social accessory women simply mislaid. I paid for my own items, $26.41 on my debit card, while she stepped outside to call my father and complain loudly enough for the automatic doors to carry her voice back in. Colleen told me not to worry, that Denise would settle up another day. Nothing about that visit felt remarkable except a brief oddness when Colleen asked if I was still using my old rolling case for supplies and whether I ever brought it into stores. It was such a specific question that I looked at her differently, but she smiled right through it. I said no. I had switched to a black tote months before. She nodded as if that meant something. 3 days later, on Tuesday, March 14th, I got a voicemail at 10:18 in the morning from Tessa Moreno. Her voice was professional in a way I had not heard before. She said, "Lauren, call me as soon as you can. Do not come in until we speak." My scalp prickled before I even called back. I was in the Target parking lot with a trunk full of drawer organizers and a new pair of black Salon shoes I had bought on sale. I sat behind the wheel, receipt still warm in my hand, and listened while Tessa explained that someone from Sheer Essence had reported a retail theft and named me. According to them, I had walked out with $4,260 in professional color, extension bundles, and tools on March 11th. They had filed a police report that morning, and, because my name had come up in local beauty circles, Colleen had felt ethically obligated to let salons know. I did not understand the sentence on first hearing. My brain kept snagging on the amount because it was absurd. $4,260 was not one impulsive armful of product. It was a small business quantity. Tessa said she was not accusing me of anything, but until the matter was clarified, she could not let me begin taking clients or access backbar inventory. Insurance, trust, optics. She sounded angry on my behalf, but angry in a way that still closed the door. I remember staring at the thin plastic Target bag in the passenger seat and thinking how stupidly ordinary the morning had been 5 minutes earlier. There are days that split cleanly down the middle, before the call, after the call. When I got home, my mother was making tuna salad at the kitchen island, chopping celery in neat, hard strokes. I told her what Tessa had said. She did not look surprised. She set down the knife, wiped her fingertips on a dish towel, and said, "Then you need to tell the truth before this gets uglier." It was so close to certainty that I actually laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because my body could not place her expression. My father came in from the garage while I was still standing there, and my mother repeated the accusation as though briefing him on weather. He did not ask whether it was true. He asked how much they said I took. I told them I had never stolen anything from that store, had never even gone near the stockroom, had my own receipt, and wanted to see the report. My mother crossed her arms and said Colleen had security footage and a witness statement. Then she said the line that would later make its way around church, around extended family, around women who had watched me grow up and should have known better. She said, "No one hires a thief with a license." She said it with almost tender disappointment, as if she were helping me accept a truth about myself. My father asked if I understood the damage this could do to Brittany's baby shower if people started talking. That was his first concern. I drove straight to the Cedar Rapids Police Department substation on First Street and asked to make a statement. The desk officer, a tired man with pale eyebrows and reading glasses low on his nose, found the report number after a minute and a half of typing. Seeing my own name attached to a theft report felt physically wrong, like hearing your heartbeat on a recording and not recognizing it. The report listed me as a suspect named by store management in connection with a loss discovered after a weekend inventory count. Colleen Mercer had signed a store loss affidavit. A witness named Travis Mercer had signed that he saw me carry a black-wheeled case from the stock area to my car. There was no arrest warrant, no charges yet, but the complaint was active. I made a formal denial statement and asked for a copy request. I also asked whether there was surveillance. The officer said any video would need to be obtained during the investigation or by subpoena if it became necessary. I walked out with a case number for my statement and a brochure on theft allegations that smelled faintly of dusty paper. The sky had gone from silver to cold blue. I sat in my car and took photos of everything. Case number, time, nameplate on the front desk, brochure, parking meter, the steering wheel under my hands. I did not yet know how wide this would spread, but I understood one thing very clearly. If they were willing to put my name into a police report, then memory would not be enough. I needed records. That night, I opened a new email folder and a Notes app document titled March Incident. I saved screenshots of Tessa's voicemail, call log times, bank transaction for my $26.41 purchase, and a scan of my receipt from Sheer Essence. I wrote down the exact words my mother had used in the kitchen while the smell of tuna and chopped celery still sat heavy in the room. I also texted Colleen directly. I kept it plain. "Colleen, I have been told you named me in a theft report. I did not take anything from your store. Please preserve all surveillance footage and documents related to March 11th. She did not answer. That silence was answer enough. The next morning, there was a message from the Iowa Board of Cosmetology and Arts and Sciences. It was polite and alarming. They had received a public concern call regarding my recent licensure and wanted to note that pending criminal allegations should be reported if charges were filed. It was not yet disciplinary action, but the implication was there. Someone had gone beyond gossip and called an institution. My mother hummed while loading the dishwasher as I listened to the message on speaker. She did not ask what it was. That is how I knew she already knew. My named older woman in this story is Loretta James. She was 68 then, widowed, sharp-eyed, and one of the oldest members of Grace River Church. She wore her silver hair in a smooth bob and carried wintergreen mints in a quilted navy handbag. Loretta had known my mother since before I was born, and she had the rare habit of looking directly at young women when older people spoke around them. She had been in the fellowship room the first time my mother made the thief with a license comment in public. I know because Loretta caught my eye across the coffee urns and held it for a second too long, the way decent people do when they know something wrong has just been made communal. That Sunday after service, while everyone lined up for crock-pot meatballs and sheet cake for a missionary fundraiser, Loretta touched my sleeve and asked if I had eaten. It was not really about food. We stood near the stack of paper plates while my mother laughed too brightly at the opposite table. Loretta said very quietly, "Your mother is telling this as settled fact. It is not settled." Then she put a mint in my palm and said, "Write down dates before people sand the edges off them." I still have the wrapper from that mint in the pocket of an old coat. Some kindnesses are so small that they almost disappear. Some are structural. That was structural. I called an attorney on Monday. Her name was Janelle Wu, and her office overlooked a parking lot and a chiropractor's sign, which somehow made me trust her more. She was not impressed by emotional language. She wanted dates, documents, names, and institutional touchpoints. I gave her all of it in a blue folder. She asked whether I believed my parents were merely repeating gossip or actively participating. I heard myself say they knew before I told them. Saying it out loud changed the shape of the room. She nodded once and said we would move on three fronts at the same time: preservation letters to the store and the board, a formal records request where possible, and a cease and desist concerning defamatory statements, if naming me continued publicly. I went back to Maple and Ash that week only to collect the box of tools I had left there after my trial shift. The salon smelled like citrus cleaner and hot irons. Music played softly over the speakers, and I could hear women chatting in the wash area with that comfortable intimacy salons generate so easily. Nina met me at the front before I had to cross the room under other stylists' eyes. She carried my box to the car and tucked a folded microfiber towel over the sharp edge of one container so it would not spill. It was such a practical, lovely gesture that I nearly cried. At the curb, she said, "Keep your schedule open. This won't stay theirs forever." She did not ask what had happened. She simply handed me back the future in a sentence. The first escalation came from my father. He was a deacon at Grace River, and he understood exactly how to weaponize concern without ever sounding malicious. On Wednesday, March 22nd, he asked Pastor Glenn if there could be prayer around a difficult situation involving one of our young women. By evening, three separate church ladies had texted me versions of the same message. We are praying for honesty and restoration. If there is anything you need to confess, the Lord already knows. This is not the end if you come clean. My crime had become a spiritual lesson before it had become anything else. That is one way families trap you. They turn your defense into rebellion. The second escalation came from Brittany. She called me from the parking lot of her prenatal appointment. Voice soft and exhausted in a way that made her sound reasonable. She said, "Mom is worried this will affect the baby shower. Could you just stay away for a while until things settle?" I asked if she thought I had done it. There was a long enough pause for me to hear turn signal clicks and a car door slamming somewhere near her. Then she said, "I think stress makes you impulsive sometimes." I had never stolen so much as mascara in my life, but Brittany had learned from our mother that you do not need a believable accusation if you can create an emotional atmosphere around it. Her reckoning would come later, and it would not save her. The third escalation was institutional and nastier. On March 24th, the board sent a follow-up email asking whether there had been any police contact related to allegations involving professional products or retail theft. The wording was too specific to be random. Someone had spoken to them again and framed the accusation in terms that touched my license directly. Janelle sent a response the same day stating that no charges had been filed, that the allegation was contested, and that any unverified complaint should not be treated as fact. She copied me and instructed me not to call anyone emotionally. "Paper is your friend now," she said. I wrote that down. I also filed my own police report, not for theft, but for harassment and false reporting concerns. I understood they would not call it that yet, but I wanted my objection in the record as early as possible. I submitted a written timeline with attachments: receipt, board email, Tessa's voicemail transcript, screenshots of church texts. Janelle explained that one of the strongest things an ordinary person can do in a chaos campaign is become boringly organized. Boring beats dramatic every time in official settings. So I became boring. Then something useful happened because people who lie often get lazy in the middle. On the afternoon of March 27th, I received a call from a blocked number. A boy's voice asked if this was Lauren Parker. I said yes. There was breathing, a car going by. Then a rush of words. It was Travis, the teenager from Sheer Essence. He said he was sorry for calling this way. He said his Aunt Colleen had told him to sign a witness form after inventory because she was handling a problem with Denise's daughter, and he had not actually read the details. He thought it was a routine stock discrepancy. He did remember me in the store, but he had not seen me take anything. He kept saying I didn't know it was like that. He was 17. He sounded terrified. I asked if he would tell that to my attorney. He said he could not write then because his aunt checked his phone, but he could tell his grandmother. His grandmother was Loretta James's friend from choir. Cedar Rapids is not large in the ways that matter. I thanked him, told him not to send anything from a monitored device, and immediately wrote down the time, duration, and exact phrases. Then I called Janelle, who said this was the moment to stop chasing and start preserving. She drafted an affidavit template in plain language and arranged for Travis to sign it through a neutral notary if he became willing. 2 days later, Loretta called me from her kitchen while a tea kettle hissed in the background. She did not waste words. "Travis is here with his grandmother Eileen. He is crying. Janelle should come now. I drove to Loretta's house with my pulse thudding in my throat. Her living room smelled like lemon oil and old books. Eileen Mercer, Colleen's mother, sat upright on the sofa in a mauve cardigan with both hands wrapped around a mug she was not drinking from. Travis looked young in the unforgiving way boys do when fear strips the attitude off them. Janelle arrived 15 minutes later with a notary she knew from another matter. Travis signed an affidavit stating that he had been asked to sign a witness statement after the fact, that he did not see me remove merchandise, and that no inventory had been loaded into my vehicle in his presence. Eileen then spoke in a low, controlled voice and gave us something even more important. She said Colleen had complained 3 days earlier that the supply company's insurer was dragging their feet on a claim related to inventory shrink tied to a burst pipe and damaged stock in the rear storage area. According to Eileen, Colleen had been frantic about documentation because items had already been written off, but the back room had not been handled cleanly. Then Denise called and, in Eileen's words, said your trouble could be useful if everyone kept calm. I felt the room tilt for a second. My mother had not simply repeated a lie, she had helped shape one. Do you know the exact moment a private wound becomes a legal structure? It is the moment someone older than you says the ugly thing plainly, and there is a witness taking notes. That was the moment for me. Loretta did not gasp or comfort me. She reached for her legal pad, uncapped a blue pen, and wrote the date across the top in large, careful numbers. Then she looked at me and said, "Keep your shoulders down, honey. This is where they start making mistakes." From there, the case widened. Janelle sent a demand for preservation not only to Sheer Essence but to the parent distributor and its insurance carrier, requesting that all records connected to the claimed March inventory loss, prior damage claims, internal emails, and payment timelines be retained. We also sent a separate letter to the board noting evidence of witness coercion and possible false statements tied to my name. The tone was restrained and devastating. Restraint is its own kind of blade. Community pressure arrived right on schedule once people realized I was not going to quietly absorb this. Pastor Glenn asked if I would meet with him and my parents for a healing conversation. I declined in writing and copied Janelle. My Aunt Sherry called and said taking legal action against family was hard on everyone's nerves. I told her I understood and that I would still be proceeding. A woman from church named Melissa, who had not spoken to me in months, left me a voicemail saying, "Sometimes love means not exposing people publicly." I saved it in the folder. There is a category of person who will ask the harmed woman to become the padded wall everyone else can crash into. I was done being that surface. By early April, Tessa had officially given my chair to another stylist. She called me herself because she had enough decency not to make her receptionist do it. She said she was sorry and that if the matter cleared, she would revisit in the future. I thanked her, got off the phone, and sat on my bedroom floor with my back against the bed frame until the late sun moved off the carpet. Losing that chair hurt almost more than the accusation because it was tangible. I had already pictured my shears in the drawer, my apron on the hook, my first client list taped inside the cabinet. That is what false accusations steal first. They steal the version of the future you had already begun to inhabit. My mother, meanwhile, behaved as though my distress proved her. She moved around the house with the inflated patience of a woman who believes she is enduring another person's failure nobly. One evening, while I was printing documents at the dining room table, she set down a bowl of cut strawberries near me and said, "If you would just apologize for whatever happened, your life could start again." There was a softness to her voice that almost made it worse. She wanted me to step into the role she had prepared. The guilty daughter. The difficult one. The cautionary tale. I did not raise my voice. I said, "My life has already started. You are the one trying to stop it." My father took a different tack. He cornered me in the garage among the smell of cold concrete and fertilizer and asked what exactly I thought I was doing to this family. He said lawyers made things ugly and that church people did not forget scandal. I said neither did licensing boards. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You don't understand how much can be lost." He meant his standing. He meant his deacon title, his confidence moving through church doors, the easy trust of people who had known him 30 years. I finally understood that my innocence had never been the center of this for him. His reputation was In the second week of April, the distributor's regional office responded to Janelle with a partial acknowledgement that there had been a related insurance matter connected to damaged and missing inventory at Sheer Essence, but they would not provide detail without formal process. That was enough to confirm the track. Then, unexpectedly, a woman named Karen Bell from Midstates Commercial Claims left a voicemail for Janelle. She was the adjuster assigned to one of the store's recent loss submissions and wanted clarification because our preservation letter referenced dates and item lists she recognized. Karen did not know our family, our church, or the private theater around any of this. She knew only claim numbers, attached inventories, and payment approvals. In stories like mine, the truth often enters wearing a lanyard and sensible shoes. Karen agreed to meet with Janelle and me on April 18th at her office in Hiawatha. She wore a navy blazer, small silver earrings, and had the calm, tired competence of a woman who had spent years listening to people narrate around facts. She could not hand over the entire file yet, but she did tell us carefully that a claim involving water-damaged and unaccounted inventory at Sheer Essence had been approved in part on March 8th. Payment authorization, she said, predated the date on which I was later named as the cause of the loss. I remember the fluorescent lights buzzing above us and the slight squeak of the conference room chair when I shifted. Janelle asked whether the same item categories appeared in both the insurance claim and the theft allegation. Karen looked at her notes and said, "Many of them, yes." Then she added, "That overlap is why I returned the call." That was our hinge. Janelle moved quickly after that. She requested a formal review conference with the licensing board to clear my file and indicated there was evidence that the underlying allegation against me involved inventory already submitted for reimbursement. The board scheduled a meeting for May 9th in Des Moines. It was not a trial, but it was official enough to matter. If the accusation hung unresolved, it could shadow me for years every time I renewed, applied, or moved. If it was clarified there, in writing, my name could begin to breathe again. For reasons that still feel theatrical in retrospect, my mother insisted on hosting Brittany's baby shower the Saturday before the board conference and made sure everyone knew I was invited if she felt comfortable attending. It was not generosity. It was staging. She wanted to appear magnanimous while preserving the story that my absence would indicate guilt. I went because by then I had learned that sunlight is useful. The shower was held in our fellowship room. Same folding tables, same lemon bars, same women who had already looked at me like a problem wrapped in pastel paper. Loretta was there in a cream jacket and low heels, helping arrange gifts. She squeezed my hand once and said, "No speeches today, just keep breathing." My mother opened the event with a little thank you speech about family carrying one another through difficult seasons. She never used my name, which was somehow more pointed. Brittany smiled through gifts and tissue paper while avoiding my eyes. At one point, a woman from church asked whether I was still doing hair. My mother answered for me. "We're taking things one step at a time," she said. "It takes real confidence to erase someone while they are sitting 10 feet away." I set my paper plate down, excused myself, and went into the hallway where the industrial carpet smelled faintly of coffee and floor cleaner. Loretta followed a minute later with 2 mints in her palm. "You're not imagining this," she said. Sometimes that sentence is oxygen. The week before the board conference was all paper, no sleep. Janelle assembled binders with tabs so precise they looked almost decorative. Tab 1 was chronology. Tab 2 was the original police report. Tab 3 was my purchase receipt and bank record from March 11th. Tab 4 was the board contact log. Tab 5 was Travis's affidavit. Tab 6 was Eileen Mercer's statement memorialized by Janelle after a recorded interview. Tab 7 was the correspondence from Midstates Commercial Claims confirming the timing of the approved insurance payment. Tab 8 was a summary chart showing item overlap between the store's reimbursed loss categories and the later theft list naming me. Looking at those binders made me feel something I had not felt in weeks, weight on my side. I also moved out. Not dramatically, not with screaming. I packed over 3 evenings while my parents were at church meetings or dinner with friends. Nina let me stay in her guest room for what she called as long as paperwork needs. On the last night, she sat on the floor helping me wrap my ceramic mixing bowls in dish towels and said, "Take the lamp too." bad light makes everything feel worse. We loaded my car and her SUV just after 10. The neighborhood was quiet except for a dog barking 3 houses down and the low metallic rattle of someone's wind chime. I left my key on the kitchen counter beside a note that said, "Future contact goes through my attorney." No flourish, no accusation. By then, I had learned how much power there is in a clean exit. The board conference in Des Moines took place in a bland meeting room with gray carpet, a long laminate table, and a coffee station that smelled burned by 9 in the morning. There were 7 people on the review panel, none of whom knew me personally. I was grateful for that. Institutions can do harm, but they can also be useful when no one in the room is invested in your family's mythology. My mother and father came together. Brittany came separately, in a pale blue maternity dress, carrying her water bottle with both hands. Colleen Mercer arrived 10 minutes late in a printed blouse and too much perfume. She looked at me once and then away. There are people who can lie only as long as everyone agrees to stay informal. Official rooms make them leak. Loretta came too. She wore navy again and sat in the back near the wall, her handbag folded neatly in her lap. She had been present when my mother first made the accusation publicly at church, and she had been present the night Travis signed the affidavit. I did not need her to rescue me. I needed one older woman in the room who knew exactly what had happened and was not afraid of silence. Before the meeting began, she caught my eye and made a small flattening gesture with her palm, as if smoothing a wrinkled tablecloth. It made me drop my shoulders. The board chair, Dr. Elaine Sorensen, explained that the purpose of the conference was not to adjudicate a criminal matter, but to assess whether there was any basis for concern regarding my license or professional conduct. That distinction mattered. It also meant they were focused on records, not family emotion. Janelle presented first. She was calm enough to be almost cold. She laid out the sequence: a retail theft allegation naming me after the date of an already approved insurance payment related to overlapping inventory categories, a witness statement obtained under misleading circumstances, and subsequent calls to my employer and the board before any charge had ever been filed. She did not editorialize. She did not need to. Then the board invited Colleen to explain the original complaint. She began confidently. She said there had been inventory discrepancies, that she remembered me being in the store, that she relied on staff and records. But halfway through, one panel member asked a very ordinary question. "When precisely did you first identify Miss Parker as the suspected party?" Colleen shuffled papers, looked toward my mother for a second, and gave 2 different dates in one answer. I watched Janelle circle something on her yellow pad. Small contradictions are often the first cracks that matter. Then Karen Bell from Midstate's Commercial Claims walked in. She was not dramatic. She did not even know she was about to rearrange several lives. She had been asked to provide clarification regarding claim chronology and inventory categories. She set a folder on the table, adjusted her glasses, and stated her name and role for the record. She referred to claim number MCC 74211 and explained that Sheer Essence submitted a loss package concerning water damaged and missing professional inventory from a rear storage event. Midstates approved reimbursement on March 8th based on documentation supplied by the store and distributor. Then she turned one page, tapped it with her pen, and said the sentence that had been living in my mind since the hook of this story. This loss was paid before her name. The room changed without anyone raising their voice. Karen continued. She explained that the item groups later listed on the theft complaint naming me substantially overlapped with categories already included in the paid claim. She was careful. She did not accuse anyone of fraud because that was not her role in that meeting, but she did confirm the dates, the overlap, and the sequence. She also noted that if a third party had later been identified as responsible for the same inventory, that should have been promptly reported to the carrier to avoid duplicate recovery issues. Her tone was almost bored. That was the beauty of it. She was not there to avenge me. She was there to answer administrative questions accurately, and accuracy did the rest. If you have ever been falsely accused, you know this feeling. Not triumph first. Relief first. Relief so sharp it hurts. Relief that the truth can exist in the room without your voice having to carry it alone. I want to pause here and ask you something specific. Have you ever sat perfectly still while someone outside your family described your reality more clearly in 3 sentences than your relatives had allowed in 3 years? Because that was the strangest mercy of my life. Dr. Sorensen asked whether the board could receive Karen's written chronology. Karen said yes. Janelle asked whether Mid-States had any record of a supplemental notice identifying me as responsible before or immediately after payment. Karen checked her file and said, "No supplemental notice appears here prior to April." My father's pen stopped moving. My mother folded her hands so tightly the knuckles stood out. Brittany stared at the table. Colleen asked, in a voice that had lost all its brightness, whether this discussion was being recorded. The board chair answered that minutes were being kept. Loretta later told me my mother reached for her purse at that exact moment as if searching for some ordinary object that could return her to an ordinary afternoon. There was more. Janelle introduced Travis's affidavit. She introduced Eileen's statement. She introduced the board emails showing someone had contacted them before any charges existed. The panel asked who had called. The board administrator could not identify the caller from memory, but she did note that the complaint referenced me being unsafe around professional stock and clients, language strikingly similar to phrases in a text my father had sent me 2 weeks earlier about public trust. Again, no one needed to say more than that. Patterns speak. My mother's response, when finally invited, was not a defense so much as a collapse in sentence form. She said, "We were trying to prevent worse." Dr. Sorensen asked, "Worse than what?" My mother opened her mouth and then did not answer. My father attempted to say my name and stopped halfway through it. Just stopped. Brittany cried quietly without making a scene, which in her case was more honest than I had ever seen her. For one brief second, she looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had ridden the family story too long and had no idea where to put her face once it broke. The board recessed for 20 minutes. I stood in the hallway near a fake ficus tree and a vending machine humming softly in the corner. Karen passed by on her way out and gave me a polite nod because to her this was one more file, one more Tuesday, one more careful explanation in a career full of them. I wanted to hug her and laugh and cry and ask whether she had any idea what she had just done. Instead, I said, "Thank you for coming." She answered, "I go where the paperwork leads." There is another sentence I will keep for the rest of my life. When the panel returned, Dr. Sorensen stated for the record that there was insufficient basis for any licensing concern related to theft or professional dishonesty on my part. The board would note that the underlying allegation appeared materially disputed by independent documentation and no action would be taken against my license. Those were the only words I needed. No action. My name breathing again in an official room. What happened after the conference was almost quiet at first, which I think unsettled my parents more than public drama would have. There was no dramatic escort, no shouted accusation, no cinematic ending in the hallway. Colleen left quickly and nearly walked into the wrong corridor. Brittany sat on a bench near the elevator, clutching a packet of tissues she had not opened. My father stood with one hand on the back of a chair as if he were waiting for instructions from a room that had already moved on. My mother approached me once, stopped 3 feet away, and said, "Lauren." Then nothing. Her silence was the first honest thing she had offered me in years. The police matter did not instantly vanish, but once Janelle forwarded the conference documentation and affidavit package, the posture changed. The theft complaint lost oxygen. A detective contacted her for supplemental material. Then there was a request for clarification from the original reporting party. After that, nothing further came toward me. Janelle later explained that false claims often unravel not with a bang but with administrative retreat. Files get updated, interest fades, people become unavailable, institutions, when embarrassed, prefer paper corrections over moral language. I was fine with that. I did not need a speech. I needed the record to stop lying. Maple and Ash did something I did not ask for and could not have orchestrated. Tessa called a week after the conference and said one of her renters had unexpectedly moved out of state. If I still wanted the chair, it was mine beginning June 1st, she also said in her dry, practical tone. I don't love having my hiring process manipulated. That was as close to solidarity as she was likely to get, and it meant a lot to me. Nina drove me to sign the new agreement because she said major paperwork deserved witness energy. She wore sandals, carried an iced coffee that smelled like cinnamon, and sat beside me in the waiting area, reading nothing, just being there. The room felt entirely different from the first time. Not easier, mine. Community consequence spread without my help, exactly as these things sometimes do when the right outsider says the right factual thing in the wrong room for liars. Someone at Grace River had a cousin who worked in Des Moines. Someone else knew a board administrator socially. Eileen Mercer was not inclined to protect nonsense once Travis had been dragged into it. Within 10 days, church conversation shifted from what I had supposedly done to why my parents had spoken so confidently before anything was proven. Then, from that to whether Colleen had filed something improper with insurance, I did not feed a single word of it. I was too busy setting up my station, ordering capes, and relearning how to sleep through the night. But word travels fastest when the harmed person is no longer chasing it. Pastor Glenn requested another meeting, this time to clear the air. I declined again. My Aunt Sherry sent a long text about misunderstandings, stress, and the enemy attacking families. I did not answer. Brittany wrote me a message at 1:30 in the morning 3 weeks after the conference. She said she had repeated things she should not have repeated, and that being pregnant had made her cling to my mother's version of events because it felt safer than seeing what was true. It was the closest anyone in my family came to a reckoning. I believe she meant it, and I also believe meaning it is not the same as undoing it. I told her I hoped her daughter would grow up in a house where truth was not punished. Then I muted the thread. The real reckoning came from Colleen. Strangely enough, in late June, Janelle forwarded me a short email. Colleen had sent through counsel as part of resolving civil exposure around the statements made about me. It was not warm. It was not apologetic in the way people imagine. It simply acknowledged that the allegation tying me to the claimed inventory loss was unsupported, and that prior witness information had been improperly characterized. Buried in legal language was the human fact. She knew she had known enough to stop. She had kept going. That is the kind of sentence women like me are often denied. I printed it and filed it behind the board letter. On June 1st, I opened my drawer at Maple and Ash and slid my shears into place. My station smelled like new vinyl and disinfectant. My mirror was spotless. I arranged my clips by size and my brushes by barrel width. At 10 that morning, I took my first client as a licensed renter, a middle school teacher named Andrea, who wanted soft layers and said she had heard good things about my blowouts from Nina. Halfway through the appointment, while warm air moved through the ends of her hair and sunlight bounced off the foil trays at the next station, I realized my hands were steady again. It felt almost suspicious how ordinary healing could look from the outside. I have been asked whether I forgave my parents. The answer is not yet, and maybe not in the way people mean when they ask. Forgiveness in some circles is treated like an accessory women are expected to produce to reassure everyone else. I do not have that for them right now. What I have is clarity. I have no contact with my mother. I have limited legal only contact with my father regarding one remaining administrative matter. Brittany and I exchange nothing beyond the occasional neutral update through a cousin if there is a funeral or a birth. The old machinery cannot reach me the same way anymore because I no longer live where it is housed. There are things I still notice. If someone phrases a concern too gently, I feel my body go alert. If a client jokes about mothers being controlling, I smile politely and change the subject. On Sundays, I do not go to Grace River. Nina invited me to her aunt's backyard brunch group instead, where no one asks intrusive questions and there's always too much fruit on the table. Last August, when the tomatoes were at their sweetest, I sat in a folding chair under string lights with Nina, her Aunt Teresa, two neighbors, and a woman named Monica who brought cardamom buns still warm from the oven. We talked about nothing dramatic: school lunches, humidity, a dog that had learned to open screen doors, ordinary things, chosen things. That is the ending I trust now. Loretta still calls me once a month, usually around 7 in the evening when she is washing up teacups. Last winter, she told me she had left Grace River too. Not because of me, she said, but because she had grown tired of rooms where truth had to arrive with documentation before compassion could stand up. I laughed harder than I expected. Then she said, "For what it's worth, dear, they are very uncomfortable these days." Community consequence had settled where it belonged. Not as revenge I delivered, but as reality they now had to inhabit. A few months ago, a new client sat in my chair and said she was nervous because a former boss had told her she was difficult. I sectioned her hair, clipped back the top layer, and looked at her in the mirror. I said sometimes that just means someone lost control of the story. She went very still. Then she smiled. There is no courthouse speech at the end of my story, no perfect restoration, no family reunion under softer lighting. There is only this: my name was used in a false report. My career was threatened before it began. My parents helped do it. I documented everything. An outsider with a file told the truth in front of the same kind of people who had watched me be humiliated. And now, when I lock up my station at night and turn off the ring light over the mirror, I go home to a life they do not control. The last time I saw my mother in person was at a grocery store in Marion just before Christmas. I was in the produce section choosing rosemary, and she turned the corner with a cart full of things for a party I would not be attending. For 1 second, we looked directly at each other under those two bright overhead lights, while Christmas music played softly above the apples. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I nodded once and moved on toward the onions. My hands did not shake. That matters more than I can explain. Not because I had won some dramatic contest, but because her version of me no longer entered the room first. If you are listening to this while someone in your life is trying to define you before the facts arrive, please hear me carefully. Write it down, save it, date it, photograph it, forward it. Ask for things in writing. Let boring records outlast loud people. You do not need to perform innocence if you are busy proving truth. Sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is refuse to collapse on schedule. That was the lesson my parents taught me by accident. It cost me months, $4,000 in lost income, one apartment deposit I had to delay, and a version of family I had spent years trying to earn. But in return, I got something steadier. I got a life with doors they cannot walk through. And tonight, after I finish recording this, I'm going to Nina's apartment for soup. Her Aunt Teresa will probably bring bread in a towel-lined basket. Monica may come by after work with those ridiculous good cookies from the bakery on Edgewood Road. Someone will ask whether I want extra Parmesan. Someone will hand me a bowl before I ask. We will eat at a scratched wooden table under a light bulb that is slightly too warm, and no one there will confuse love with leverage. That is not forgiveness. It is better for now, it is peace, built carefully by people who chose me.